Hey everybody, Plushie here, and today we're going to talk a little bit about buff caps. If you're not aware, every buff type in FGO, such as MP damage up, crit up, attack up, or even debuff, such as defense down, has a cap to it. Basically, they can only go up or down a certain percent before it stops. The number initially is probably put there as a failsafe in case somebody went too high with these numbers and the game engine can't handle it or something, but in reality, it's basically impossible to reach any of these caps. But as the game develops throughout the years, we're at year 10, they definitely amped up the numbers in terms of how much buffs each servant can receive, from either themselves or from meta supports. And today I want to focus on crits, which caps at 500% extra. And I personally believe that is too low. Now initially, you might say, Plushie, you're crazy. That's because you only do min turns and you buff stack a shit ton. That's why you feel like 500% crit is very easy to reach. Well, that would be true if we didn't get class score and the two new appends kind of like back to back. Well, not really back to back, but in the past 2 to 3 years. So class score, most people are probably aware, is a skill tree-esque system in FGO where you slowly upgrade the branches and unlock them, and eventually all of the servants from a certain class or a group of classes, in the case of extra classes, will get a permanent passive buff attached to them. And luckily for me, you can actually open up the class score and it will show you a list of total buffs you receive from your current class score. So I'm going to access my extra 2, which I have maxed for a very long time already. And this is the list of buffs that you get from maxing out class score. So of course, you get the extra attack and defense up when you target a servant with a command spell. You get a passive 10% MP damage up, pretty good. You get a passive 50% extra attack effectiveness up, that's also pretty good. You get a passive 20% rainbow buff, but only to damage. So basically, this is the same type of buff as a Buster, Quick, or Arts up, but it doesn't affect Star Gen and MP Gen, but it does affect MP damage. So this can help you farm, again, on top of the MP damage up. And then we have a very innocent passive 10% universal crit up. But then, when we keep going down, start to see something a little bit sus. So first of all, you get a passive 60% quick crit up, 40% arts crit up, and 20% buster crit up. Basically, they're trying to balance out, or at least try to offset, the damage differences between the 3 card types. So add on top the universal 10% crit up. From the class score, if you max it out, you get 70% quick crit up, 50% arts crit up, and 30% buster crit up. Which honestly already sounds kind of ridiculous. 70% passive quick crit up, which just always exists, is pretty nuts. And maxing out class score will seem expensive when it first comes out, but as time goes on, you will eventually max them. I have currently 3 maxed and almost can max a 4th. So it's, it's a progressive thing. You would eventually max out at least 1 or 2 class scores if you really tried, right? So yeah, that's pretty nuts. But they decided to make the problem even worse during last year's anniversary, where when they decided to add Append 4, out of all the buff types they could have added, they added more crit ups. So if you have a servant that has a max out Append 4, they have a passive 30% crit up. Add that on top of the class score crit ups I just mentioned earlier. For a servant passively, not including their actual passives, their buster cards can get up to 60% crit up, which is already larger than most active skills, which is 50%. Your arts cards can get up to 80% crit up. and your quick cards gets a whopping 100% crit up, just passively, if you have a maxed out servant. That is ridiculous. 500% no longer sounds so difficult to hit when you start at 100%. So now let's take a very easy example of a team that I always use with my favorite servant, Koyan Dark. So Koyan Dark, of course, has a 50% crit up on her skill 3, which lasts for 3 turns. Koyan Dark, I usually pair with 2 Koyan Lights because she is a Buster servant and Koyan Light is, a typical Buster support. And I also pair her with Van Gogh because Koyan Dark has the Existence Outside the Domain passive. So after 1 MP, my MP5 Van Gogh gives Koyan Dark 200% crit up. Koyan Dark gets 50% from her own skills, and she also gets 60% for her Buster cards from the 2 passives. The 2 Koyan Lights add another 100% Buster crit up, and she's at 410% Buster crit up on turn 1. I don't think that's actually okay. I'm 90% crit up off of hitting cap. And Van Gogh's MP is extremely spammable, so the next turn, if I use it again, I would be at 610% crit up. I'd be 110% crit up over the cap. So I'd be wasting 110% crit up. Well, you might say, Plushie, you're a dirty whale. Who has an MP5 Van Gogh? Fine, MP1 Van Gogh then. Reducing that 200% crit up to 150% crit up. So my turn 1 Buster crit becomes 360%. And then on turn 2, I add another 150% on top of that, I hit cap. So far, it might sound like it's a Van Gogh problem, which I can't deny that Van Gogh is ridiculous in terms of how much crit she gives. But if you take a look at just a simple quick servant, right? Their quick cards are ridiculous even with just Scotty. Caster Scotty skill 1 gives 100% quick crit up for 3 turns. And usually people use 2 Caster Scotties on quick DPSs that are more focused on quick cards. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, if you have your class score maxed and a pen 4 maxed, they start at 100% base quick crit up. So you're already at 300% crit up for your quick cards with just double Caster Scotty. It's not uncommon to use a MLB K-scope on at least one of your Caster Scotties to use their MP in a challenge quest to add either 50% or up to 100% crit up to your main DPS, which of course depends on MP level. So let's again go with the MP1 option, so you can easily hit 350% crit up on your quick DPS. Now you might say, okay, 350, not that bad as last time, right? But that is of course assuming you're not using a third support that has any form of crit up. You're not using any CEs that has any form of crit up. You're not using any command codes that has any form of crit up. Because yes, most command codes do have crit ups if you're using like an offensive one, and they do count towards the crit cap. And that's also assuming your servant has no crit ups in your kit, which is almost impossible. Most servants have like 50% crit up nowadays for SSRs, at the very least 30. So you're hovering around 400% crit up, I'd say, for quick servants, quick cards, if you just count 2 Scotties. Like if you have some CEs with a little bit of crit up, maybe you have a little bit of a crit up passive, maybe you have a crit up skill, that would put you at like 400 something. So it's ridiculous, right? Especially for quick cards, it's so easy to get to almost cap with some of the most basic and common quick supports. And I think it is about time that they raise the cap from 500% to 1000%, because that's the cap for power mods. Power mods is the buff type that is most commonly used for event bonus damages, as well as anti-trait damage that affects your face cards. because if you're not aware, there are two types of anti-trait damage. One of them only affecting your MP, but it's always calculated multiplicatively, so it ends up being better in most cases, I'd say. And the other type is power mods, which affects both the MP damage and your card damage, but it's additive with many different buff types. For example, it is additive to MP damage up buffs for MPs, and it's additive to crit ups for card damage. So Lasengos set it at 1000% because there are events like Saber Wars, which just passively gives you almost 500% power mod as an event gimmick. But I think at this point of the game, there are so many passive crit ups that exist in the game that the cap for crit up should just be at 1000% as well. Because again, for quick cards, if you have a maxed out class score and a pen 4, which is again not that difficult, like even for free to plays to achieve, at least for one class, right? You're at 100% base crit up, like not counting anything from the servant's actual kit, 100%, which is ridiculous. So anyways, hope you guys enjoyed the video. And is this video just a propaganda to push crit cap so Koyan Dart can get better at min turning than Cuckoo, because now she can go beyond 500% crit? Yeah,